Okay, good evening and welcome to the online event, COVID-19 vaccine, should we take it? I hope everyone is well in this challenging time. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Brimore. I am the founder of the Diaspora Initiative for Nigeria's Development, DIND, D-I-N-D. My day job is as director of the UK-based organization Action for Southern Africa, which is the successor to the British anti-apartheid movement. Diaspora Initiative for Nigeria's Development is a project that I and others involved in do in a voluntary capacity because of our love for our country, Nigeria. So a lot has been said about COVID vaccine hesitation and distrust among people of African and Black ancestry. Much of this is as a result of decades of historical unjust treatment of people from these communities in the trials of medicines and vaccines. The legitimate distrust, sometimes becomes something of an albatross in the full participation of people from these communities in vaccination efforts, like the current one that we are going through. This event is to help establish the fact about the COVID-19 vaccines and the concept of vaccination to help us make an informed decision. I would like to thank our speakers. We have 4 incredible speakers today. They have spared their time to come and have this conversation with us. They are Dr. Aishatu Ali. Dr. Ali is a medical doctor, consultant general pediatrician with the United Kingdom National Health Service, the NHS. She is also a clinical educator at the University of Buckingham. Dr. Ali will tell us about the science of the immune system, and she will be able to answer any of your questions around this. Our second speaker will be Dr. Ama Shalangwa. Dr. Shalangwa is an epidemiologist and public health practitioner, also with the NHS. She is also a research scientist in infection and immunity at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Dr. Shalangwa will explore reasons for vaccine hesitancy from a historical perspective. Then we have Reverend Professor Michael Olabode Balogun. Professor Balogun is a highly qualified, I couldn't possibly begin to quantify in this short time his qualification. Is a professor of medicine and a consultant cardiologist based in the United Kingdom. His many years of medical practice spans across Nigeria and the United Kingdom. As a reverend, he is pastor at the New Covenant Church that has presence in Nigeria, Manchester, and Glasgow. Professor Balogun will consider the merit or otherwise of various fears that people may have about the purpose of the current vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Balogun is our 4th and final speaker for the day. Dr. Balogun is the director of pharmacovigilance and drug safety with a UK-based company. He acquired his master's degree in pharmacovigilance and pharmacoepidemiology from the University of Bordeaux in France. Bordeaux, I think is the right pronunciation. He is part of a drug development team which researches and develops new medicines. Dr. Balogun will tell us about the science behind vaccine production, as well as touch on historical injustices, towards mostly people racialized as Black in medicine and vaccine research. Our speakers have around 10 minutes each for their presentation, and then we will have a panel discussion for much of the remaining time. Please note that internet connection reliability differs from place to place. And should any of our panelists experience difficulties, it may be necessary for them to exit the meeting and then rejoin later again. So please bear with us should that happen. During the event, you can ask questions by using the chat function. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you can ask questions there as well. To do so, just use the chat box in either Facebook Live or in the system that we're using. It is our hope and our commitment to see discussions here, contribute to the wider conversation on clarifying the role, the importance, and the safety of the COVID vaccine, and hopefully to ending this pandemic. So thank you very much. And again, welcome to this live event. So we are going to start straight away with Dr. Aisha. Dr. Aisha is going to share a screen with us, and then she's going to make a presentation for 10 minutes. Dr. Aisha.
Thank you, Michael. It's my Pleasure to be on this talk. Thank you for giving me the privilege, and everybody who's joining us, thank you for giving up your time. And I hope that at the end of this session, you find it useful. So like Michael said, I'm just going to talk to us about the immune system and how our body fights infections generally. Now, this is can be quite a complicated topic, and I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible. Okay, and I'm going to be using mostly pictures. So this is just a picture highlighting how our body fights infection. So I'm going to use viruses from going on forward, because obviously we're dealing with COVID, and COVID is a virus, but obviously this doesn't only work for viruses. So our immune system has two kind of broad categories. We have the innate, which is also the physical part, and then we have the adaptive system, which is the internal part. So when our body comes in contact with a virus, it's got the physical barriers to try and protect you from catching this virus. So going from our eyes, we have tears that will hopefully catch the virus. In our respiratory tract, we have hair inside our nose. We have like mucus inside our lungs that traps the virus and helps us cough it out. And obviously our skin also protects us from the virus getting inside. But unfortunately, the virus can sometimes get inside. And so when it does get inside, that's when the adaptive part of the immune system comes into effect. And the adaptive part, we've got the specific and the non-specific parts of the adaptive system. So my son was just giving me a nice analogy about how, when I was explaining this to him, is if you imagine on a battlefield, you have foot soldiers. So foot soldiers that have no training in fighting in a war. And then you have trained soldiers. So imagine you go to battle. And initially, foot soldiers who are untrained are easy to get. So farmers, anybody are easy to get. But to train soldiers, you need lots of years of experience. So when the battle comes, you initially send out your foot soldiers who will try and keep the enemies away, but they're not very efficient because they haven't been trained. Meanwhile, you've got your trained soldiers at the back behind being trained. So when the war comes, the foot soldiers are trying their best, but the enemy gets behind before the trained soldiers are able to fight the war. So imagine the non-specific cells are your foot soldiers and the specific cells are your trained soldiers at the back. The time it takes for your trained soldiers to come into effect is the time that it takes for our body to make antibodies. So the non-specific cells are trying their best to keep the virus away, while our soldiers, our trained soldiers at the back, are preparing to fight. So say you do this first war and you fail, obviously, because you don't have trained soldiers. The next time you go into war, your trained soldiers are ready to go. So as soon as the battle starts, the enemy comes, you've got your trained soldiers ready to go, and then they kill the enemies, and that's how that's the essential basis of your immune system. So the trained soldiers, the antibody, the cells that make antibodies, or the antibody cells, they take time to develop, but once they do develop, they are efficient. So essentially, this is just another picture highlighting that. So most of us would have been immunized against measles or have caught it, or chickenpox. So when measles or chickenpox or flu comes into our system, we've already got our antibodies ready. So your trained soldiers are there. As soon as the virus gets into the system, the antibody attacks it and kills the virus. But in the case of COVID, obviously, it's a new virus and we don't have antibodies to it. So when it comes, so that's when, so your enemy, if I use my analogy of the war again, COVID is your enemy. It's coming. You only have foot soldiers on the ground. So they do their best, but unfortunately, the virus is going to get past because our trained soldiers are not ready. So the way vaccine works, as we know, is what we do is we take a copy of the virus, but we weaken the virus. So it's not quite as disease causing. So it comes into the system, but it is enough to trick the body to think that, oh, the soldiers are, the enemy is here. And so it starts to train its soldiers ready to fight when the battle comes to it again. So you've got the virus there and you've got the trained soldiers being prepared so that when the real virus does come, your trained soldiers are ready and they're ready to go to kill the virus. Now, this picture is essentially showing us, this is the general structure of most viruses. Most viruses have this basic structure. They've got the, if people can see my pointer, so they've got the spike protein, which I'm sure we've all heard in the news, spike protein, this spike protein, that. Most viruses have the spike protein. And then the virus is inside this layer So it's got a genetic material inside, which is covered in the protein coat, and another layer outside. So the way the COVID virus enters our system is that it uses the spike protein almost like a key, and then it goes into our cells, it unlocks our cells, enters into our cells, and then it releases its genetic material. Once it releases its genetic material, it then uses our body's cells to make more viruses. So it uses our protein to make a protein coat for itself. It uses our lipid to make this membrane virus. Essentially, it's using us to make more viruses, and that's how the virus replicates. So what the vaccine people have done is that they've found the gene that makes this spike protein. They put that gene into the virus, into the vaccine, and so that once it gets into our system, our body then it uses our body's system, just like the way the virus does, to make the spike protein. And once the spike protein is made, our body then recognizes the spike protein as an enemy and starts to train its soldiers to say, right, we found this enemy. Meanwhile, the foot soldiers are trying their best, but it's going to start training the trained soldiers to come and fight this virus, so that when you do come in contact with the real virus, you've already got your trained soldiers ready to go. This picture is just there to highlight the importance of herd immunity, just to explain to us what herd immunity means. So with every vaccine, there are some people that, for whatever reason, can't have it. Say they're allergic to the components, or they've got a medical condition, which means that it's not safe for them to have the vaccine, or they're babies, where the vaccine hasn't been tested on. So all these people are there and can be vaccinated. So the way we can protect these people is by more and more people in the population being vaccinated, and that's how you can protect the vulnerable who cannot be vaccinated. So if you look at my picture, say if this lady is vaccinated, this man is vaccinated, this man is vaccinated, the virus comes to this woman has already got her antibodies ready. She kicks the virus off, it doesn't get to her. The same thing with this man. So these two have protected essentially this girl, because the virus cannot get past her to affect this one. And same with that. And that's the concept of herd immunity. So for us to be able to achieve, herd immunity, more people, majority of the population need to be vaccinated to protect those that cannot be vaccinated. And hopefully we can get rid of the wild virus, and then it becomes a thing of the past. Just like polio has been almost eradicated in the whole world, smallpox has been eradicated, and that's all from, initially more and more people being vaccinated, and then the virus just dies out because there's nobody to infect, and then the virus dies out of the population. I hope this has been clear using my pictures, and thank you for listening. I will hand over back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aisha Ali. Thank you. That is, I think, broken down really, really well for anyone who might be struggling with that level of complexity that our immune system obviously is. So yeah, so before we go to our next speaker, we are going to do a very quick poll. If you have done this before, then you will know what to do. If you haven't before, as a attendee of this event or participant, just click on your screen, select the answers from what we display, and that will compute, and we will then know what the responses are. Please know that the participation in the polls are completely anonymized, so you don't, there's no way that your answer can be traced back to you, but we just want, people to just see how people feel about certain things. All right, so I'm going to launch the first poll now. All right, so if the COVID-19 vaccine were to be offered to you today, will you take it? That's it, really. If you could just vote now on your screen, and we're going to see in real life what the responses are like. Okay. All right, I'll just leave it at this now. At this point now, and we'll see what that is. Can everybody see the poll, or am I the only one seeing the poll? You can see the poll, good. So that's from the people who have responded to the poll. Yes, I will take it, you know, for the 6%, which is really, really good. No, I don't currently intend to take it until there's more evidence of efficacy, 15%. I'm not sure yet if I will or not, 31%. No, I don't think I will ever take it, 8%, and then nobody clicked on I prefer not to say. So that's a good response. Thanks so very much for all everyone who participated in this. So we will go straight into the second of our speakers, and that would be Dr. Ama Shalangwa. Sorry about that. Dr. Ama, please.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, and the executive of DIND for organizing this and inviting me today. I'm going to be speaking about information disorder and how misinformation can influence the uptake of vaccine or vaccine hesitancy. Just a little bit of disclaimer, I am not here today in my official capacity. I am not representing my organization, neither am I representing any vaccine company. I've not been paid to do this. We've not been paid by any vaccine company, and we're not here to promote any vaccine products. We are just here as responsible people from the community who see that there's a need to respond to the misinformation going around regarding COVID. Thank you. So moving on to my first slide. It's not moving. Is it moving? Yeah. Okay. So this is a nice infographic about the different types of information disorder, and it ranks from the falseness of information to its intent to harm. And looking on your left, the first circle there, misinformation. This is when you receive an information and it is clearly false, it is inaccurate, but it is shared as a joke or as a satire or just for fun, and it shouldn't be taken seriously. And this kind of information are not created to cause any harm. They are just for fun, and they're just as mere jokes. But we know that sometimes some of these jokes and satires can be taken out of context. Now, where it begins to become harmful is when it gets into the second circle, in the intersection there, you can see disinformation. This is where information is fabricated, is deliberately manipulated for conspiracy or to increase rumors or for any other reason. And then it gets even worse when it goes to the right, where we see malinformation, and this is deliberate fabrication of information. It is false and it has the intent to harm the population. And for example, it might have an element of truth in it, but it might be that the date, the day, and the time of that information has been changed to suit the present day. So that information is not valid for now. It was valid at that time that that information was created. So this can harm the public because it is deliberately manipulation or change of dates of something to represent what is happening now, which is not the case. And the next slide is also talking about misinformation. And the 7 boxes that we see here will fit into one of those 3 circles that I just spoke about. And I will not talk about all these. I will just talk about the first and the last here, if you can see my pointers. So the first one, which I already mentioned, is when information is clearly not to harm. It's just for joke and maybe as satire, just for people to have fun, but it might be taken out of context. And those kind of information are quite okay because the reason why they were made is not to harm. But then again, this last slide, you can see that there are some information that will have a very nice caption, a big heading that has no link to the content of the story. So nice caption, but disconnect with whatever is written inside. So we need to analyze situations. We need to analyze information when they come to us. And you will agree with me that every morning you wake up and you look at your WhatsApp message, you see different kind of media, stories, text, you know, of different things happening. For example, during this pandemic, you might see some kind of drama happening where they will say someone took a vaccine and this is the thing that is happening to them and they are shaking and all that. We need to be able to judge the kind of information that we receive, whether they are meant to just be for jokes or whether they should be taken seriously. And my next slide is a small quiz for all of us here today. Just in a minute, or let's just say 30 seconds because we do not have time. I want you to just look at the slide, and there are 4 pictures on this slide, and see if you can tell me which one of these pictures you think is true or which one is false, or whether they're all fake or whether they're all real. You don't have to shout out the answer, just in your seated position there, or if you've got somebody beside you, you can just chat about it and tell me what you think about these 4 photos. Okay, 2 more seconds. Right, moving on. Let's start with a photo on the right side, the top right. This is a photo of 3 past presidents up there laughing at Donald Trump just because he didn't win the election. So if you look at this picture, it looks so nice, but is it true? Could this be happening? People of such caliber, could they be doing this to Donald Trump? You know, if you don't critically analyze this photo, you will get angry. Why are they treating a president that way? Now let's go to the next photo at the bottom there. This is a very nice photo and it looks so good. It looks so real. That's again Donald Trump, and I don't know why I'm using Donald Trump as an example. That photo is so good, so well created, and you would think, wow, why are they letting the president move out of the White House in just 1 red suitcase and 1 blue suitcase? You know, but that is actually not true. It can't be, but that picture is well created, and that if you don't look at it and look at all the salient points, then you will misjudge that photo and you say, this is how he was treated when he was leaving the White House. Now, the picture in the middle is a picture of a secretariat of the Stingy Men Association of Nigeria. And there might be many people from Nigeria here on this program today. At the beginning of the year, this group came up, they just came up for jokes, for fun. You know, they created a group called Stingy Men's Association. And the next day or so, they had already built a secretariat. How possible is that? But this is someone who has cleverly just got a secretariat of something and put a nice graphic we can see on it. And it just looks so real, like they have got a secretariat. But this is all created for fun. And if you do not know this, you would take it whole-ha, hook, line, and sinker and say, wow, this is a secretariat. And now to the last picture on the left. This is a picture that looks like it is photoshopped, because clearly we can see a dog's face, but we can see the body of a horse. So was a dog's head photoshopped onto the neck of a horse? But actually, among all those 4 pictures, this photo here on the left is the truest. It is the one that is true. This is a Mexican hairless breed of dog. They use this dog as a ritual to escort the dead to the land of the underworld. So they are called, and I cannot pronounce the name, is a Zolo something something. So I call it the Zolo breed of dog. This is a real picture. So I am just using these illustrations just so that you know that there's always more to something. You need to analyze any information you receive. You need to know whether they are actually to be taken seriously or not. And if you ask questions, you're not doing the wrong thing. We have to be careful with the kind of information that we take in, because they can make or they can mar us. Now, moving on to the next slide, vaccine hesitancy. This just simply refers to the delay or total refusal of taking a vaccine, simply put. And this is quite understandable now in the period that we're in this pandemic, because there's so much misinformation out there and people are hesitant. And we should actually take that into cognizance. We shouldn't discard all the information. It's quite acceptable to hear people's views on why they are not taking the vaccine. We should be sensitive to those views. So when people hesitate taking a vaccine, especially COVID-19 vaccine, that is a big challenge challenge against the fight of COVID-19. And vaccinations are considered to be of great public health achievement. We owe a lot to the development of vaccines because incidences, transmissions, all decrease with vaccine. And looking on to this graph, I call this a graph of success because it just shows us some illnesses that we had in the past that have now been either controlled or eradicated. And we can see here on the top here, we've got, sorry, I've got to move something off here. We've got diphtheria. First, we can see how diphtheria was in the past, and now it has gone down, it's controlled. This is meningococcus C. We can see the graph. We don't have it, it's not of concern anymore. We can see polio. We can see polio, and you agree with me that Nigeria is one of the countries that has achieved eradication of polio. We got that last year, so that is really good. We can see influenza type B. We still have that, but we're not struggling with it. It's controlled. Measles, the same, it's down, it's controlled. Pertussis, the same, is down. Pertussis is whooping cough. And if we look at this graph, there's more diseases we can add here. At the top here, we can add smallpox, because smallpox is one of the vaccines first created by Edward Jenner in the 1796 or so. And what do we want for COVID today? We want COVID to be found here at the bottom, right here. We want COVID to be a thing of the past. So vaccines have actually contributed to the decline of morbidity and mortality. That's the decline of illnesses and death. Now, there are certain group of people, this is a continuum I'm going to show to you of groups of people and how they and where they fall in the vaccine acceptance continuum. So there's some group of people who you promote a vaccine to. These are the accept all people. You tell them about a vaccine, they will accept it. They don't even want to hear about how good or how bad the vaccine is. They're just ready to take a vaccine because they know it is good for them. And we have here at the extreme right here are the people who will refuse all. And these are people that no matter the science behind the makeup of the vaccine, no matter how you promote this vaccine to them, it is a no for them. And this is as a matter of principle, and that's okay. And then you have some people in this category, and these are some people that will accept some of the vaccines and not accept others. And then there's some who will delay. They want to see what is going to happen to this subset of people who are being given the vaccine. They want to see whether it will cause any harm before they put themselves forward to take it. That's fine, but remember that delay also has its own consequences, and there are some people who would refuse some kind of vaccine and would take all. For example, there are some people who have benefited from polio vaccines or maybe TB vaccines, but for these vaccines of today, they would say no. So these are the group of the groups that people fall under when it comes to vaccine hesitancy. And all this is caused because of the misinformation out there regarding vaccines. Now, we know that the infection, this is COVID now, the infection, its presentation, its severity, and the admissions in hospital, and even subsequently death, is more on the BME community. The BAME means Black and minority ethnic communities, or some people call it Black and Asian minority ethnic communities. So that group of people have been disproportionately affected by COVID, and there's evidence is seen in the US, in the UK, and other European countries. And why? The reasons are multifactorial. There are so many, and if we begin to talk about those reasons today, we will not leave here because that is a topic for another day to be explored. But some examples include our living standards, poor living standards, inequality. We constitute a great percentage of frontline workers. We are the most vulnerable. We suffer from comorbidities and so many reasons. I can go on and on and on. But yes, we are the highest, we're the worst hit by COVID. And look at the graph here. And people did not just wake up one morning to want to discriminate against us and say, no, we are the highest hit. They have done their research, they have done studies, and there's lots and lots of information out there to back up their study. And this is one graph that I found, which I think is very good. This is where we fall under, and look at how the graph is. Look at the depth. Look at how long it is to the end. If you turn this graph the other way around, you will see that it is a pyramid like this. So yes, we have been impacted by COVID. We are the worst hit, but we are the least to accept a vaccine. You know, one GP did a study in some GP practices, and the results he found was 20 to 30% of DNAs were people from BAME communities. DNA means did not attend a clinic appointment or did not attend a hospital appointment. So 20 to 30% of BAME communities, of groups, missed their vaccine appointment compared to only 2 to 3% of people from other ethnic groups. That is huge. So what are the reasons? All the reasons we have fall under these three categories. It is one, confidence, trust for policies, trust for decision-making, trust on our healthcare services, trust, we have trust and doubts. So that's the first one, confidence. The second one is complacency. We are so complacent. We say, for example, we say, well, we've been told that COVID will only kill like 2% of the 20% of people it affects, because it will only affect maybe 20% of people in the population, and only 2% will die. But that is a significant number. So people just take that as not serious, but actually it is serious, and we must not be complacent of this. And the next is convenience. For some people, truly is not convenient. Maybe it's not affordable, or the hospital or the clinic where they're going to take the vaccine is not readily accessible, is not very near. And this would be for people who are not maybe in the Western world, where health facilities are not, you know, very readily available. But for people who are here in the UK or in the Western world, we really do not have any excuse. And especially for the UK, I know that in every community, there'll be a GP practice where you can walk to for an appointment or to get your vaccine. So convenience will not be the case here. But there are some people who genuinely, and not because of the rumors or anything they've heard, it's just out of lack of, you know, access to receive those services. And then more generally, I'll mention just a few points, and they will all fall under one of these headings. Some people is because of some social reasons, some cultural reasons, some political affiliations, so it's a particular political group that do not want the vaccines. Some people feel it's a social responsibility for them to support their community. For example, a community is saying, we are not going to take it, and you just feel, I can't take it because nobody's taking it in my community. I don't want to betray people. For some people, it's for religious reasons, and most of us, where we come from, we know we're very religious. We take our religious leaders very seriously, and sometimes they do not have the right information. They do not have facts. They do not have figures. They only talk out of emotions because they do not want it, and we run with their own vision. We do not check. We do not analyze. We just take whatever they give to us. And I can tell you that even healthcare workers will fall under this category. Sometimes we know the science, but we are held somewhere because we are so emotional about this particular religious leader that has said this to us, and then we do not do the right thing. And then there are some personal factors as well. For example, past experiences with maybe health services, or maybe family history of someone that has had an adverse effect before in the past. So much social pressure going on. People are saying, don't take it, you know, and everyone is doing it. Everyone is not taking it. Why should I take it? You know, that social norm, you know, we are stuck with it. So these are some of the general reasons, but more specific reasons for us, BAME community, is what history has taught us. History has taught us a very bad lesson in the past. There's a lot of inequality and discrimination. BAME communities have been taken advantage of. And for example, in the Tuskegee syphilis studies, if you know about the syphilis studies, where a certain group of people were used for a research, and they were not given informed consent, and they were used for this research. And even this was a research on syphilis. And even when a breakthrough came for syphilis, when a drug of choice was found, they were not told and they were not treated. And that is actually unethical, you know, in this day and time. That is actually very wrong. So, and this went on for a very long time. So up till today, people still have that in their mind. So they do not trust these things. They do not trust the authorities. They do not trust the system. And I know that Bill Gates came in the the 1990s to apologize, but it still lingers in people's memory. People have not forgotten these things. Some other specific reason is because of lack of research. We know that we do not have good research facilities back in Africa, you know, and then we do not have lots of researchers, even in the Western world, lots of researchers from Black communities doing research. There are very few, but I must commend the ones that are there. They're really doing very, very brilliant jobs. So we've got some very good researchers. Again, lack of trust, people are doubting, people are saying, is it safe to take it? And lack of representation, lack of BAME representations in drug trials. That's because we don't put ourselves forward. So we are thinking, well, we are not well represented. How are we sure that this drug will work on us? But the researchers have to work with the resources available to them. If they do not have the Black representation, they cannot stop what they're doing. They have to go ahead with the drug experiments. You know, and for some people, like I said, it's a matter of choice. But if we weigh our options, we have only two options. We have the good option or the bad option. And this brings me to the benefits versus the risk. If we weigh our options, we will see that the risk of taking a vaccine actually is very low compared to the benefits. And on my scale here, I have only, let's start with the risk. I have only two things. I have one, the adverse effects of the vaccine, which can be linked or not to the vaccine. So the adverse effect might be linked to or not to the vaccine, because it can be that you have taken a vaccine, but you got a reaction which is not linked to the vaccine. It could just be a mere coincidence that you have eaten something or you have gone somewhere and mixed with something and then you had a reaction. So it should be traced before you can be sure that it is the vaccine that caused it, before you make small videos and post it and send it to 1 million people. You know, we need to check these things. And the other point I have there is the cost. Making vaccines are not cheap. They're very, very expensive. They are time consuming. You know, a lot of resources go into vaccine production. And that is why I don't think people are putting so much money into this just to come and, you know, just at the end of the day, when they know that it won't work. You know, they are putting money and they are going from different stages. If they see that it won't work, they will stop it. And I know Dr. Balogun is going to come and talk about vaccine after this. And on the other side of the scale is the benefits. The benefits outweigh the risk, and there are several benefits I've listed here. The efficacy is very efficient. The vaccines are very good. They reduce severity of the disease. They reduce the frequency of the disease or your frequency of going to the hospital. They decrease incidences and transmission risk, and they help us protect. They help in herd immunity, which Aisha has already explained, because the more people take the vaccine, the more the whole community is protected. And what else does it do? It helps us in reducing our disability adjustable years. These are the years that you spend with a disability, because if you've got an information, it might lead to a disability. But if there's an intervention, for example, a vaccine, it can stop you from, you know, from getting seriously ill. So bringing me to my second to the last slide, just in summary, what I've said so far, vaccine hesitancy is caused by information disorder. And vaccine hesitancy didn't start today, but it has been heightened now because of the change in the scientific atmosphere and because of media environment. Scientific atmosphere in that, for example, this COVID vaccine was made very quickly and people are doubting it. It's because of advance in science and nothing else. And also, my other point is, to be successful in reducing this vaccine preventable diseases, high level of uptake is very important. So there's no point making the vaccine and it's just sitting there and people are not taking them. People have to take them so that we achieve a high coverage. And if there's a high coverage, that means there's better herd immunity. And then also the safety and the surveillance of this drug needs to be understood by the public, because it is not well understood. And that is why people are actually doubting how important and how safe these vaccines are. And then lastly, just 3 points I have here for people to actually take vaccines and for us to counter this vaccine hesitancy. Policies need to be transparent. The process of making vaccines needs to be explained to people, and the public's perspective and views have to be listened to. And with all these, I think we can achieve quite a good level of vaccine uptake. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amar. That's really detailed and comprehensive. I think a lot of people listening who've joined us today will find it very, very beneficial, and to go over later on again and unpick some of the information in there. Thank you very much. So we are going to quickly do another poll, and then we will go on to our next speaker straight away. So a second poll that I want us to quickly react to has to do with a post-COVID future. You know, I just found it a little interesting, and I want it to be a little bit of fun, you know, but also at the same time, it might have a bit of serious information in there for some of us to provoke some of our thinking as to how do we keep ourselves safe in the future. So I'm going to launch the poll now, and the question is, how will COVID-19 change how you live your life in a post-COVID future? You know, you can select, you know, multiple answers for this one. You know, I will always use face masks when traveling or in crowded spaces. I will not use handshakes to greet people. You know, I will avoid crowded spaces. I will live as normal as I did before COVID-19. I will wash my hands more regularly than I did before. Please feel free to respond to it. Again, the polls are completely anonymized, so we cannot identify who is responding to what. Okay, I'll just give it a few seconds and then we'll end it and display the results. Okay, thanks for everyone who has responded. Thank you very much. So we have, okay, some people are still responding. Okay, all right, so I'll just end the poll now here and I'll share the results. So we have 77% of people say, I will wash my hands more regularly than I did before. I think I can say that it's going to be true for myself as well, which has real consequence for public health, for our individual health and the wider public health as well. And then coming close to that is 54% of people who said, I would avoid crowded spaces. And you know, my wife Blessing was just saying, you know, earlier on that we're going to need to retrain ourselves in how to be social. So that's going to be really interesting to see. And then we have 46% of people say I will not use handshakes to greet people. Okay, so we'll go very quickly to our next speaker, and our next speaker is Professor Balogun. Professor.
Good. Thank you very much for inviting me to this unique program. And I'm glad to be in the midst of experts of various disciplines. I am not an infectious disease expert, and I'm not a vaccinologist. A professor of medicine and a consultant cardiologist. But since I've trained so many doctors and specialists, I think I'll be able to advise with respect to my topic. I've been asked to speak on myths in relation to COVID vaccine, the misconceptions, and to address some of this. We have to understand that these myths are not as a result of lack of intelligence or people who are not educated. These myths are cut across many sections of the society. I have colleagues who believe in some of these myths. So we understand that people have genuine concerns. And as Dr. Amma said, if you remember the Tuskegee issue, the injustice of the past, then you can understand why BIM, ethnic group, are reluctant to participate in vaccination. Now, one of the myths is that the vaccine can give you COVID. The truth is the vaccine cannot give you COVID. It cannot, because the vaccine is not made from attenuated virus like the older vaccines. And the spike protein does not have the capacity disease. So this is not true. None of the vaccines use the attenuated virus. The second myth is that the vaccine is a way of tracking people, monitoring people through microchips or RFID tags, and can be used for mind control. Again, that is not true, because if it is to track people, to monitor people, that is already in existence. It's easy if you have a mobile phone to be monitored. If you have credit cards, international passport, you can easily be monitored, especially when crime takes place. People can be detected as to where they've been and so on, how much money they've spent. So there are many ways by which people can be tracked right now. So I don't think the vaccine, which is an expensive project, is going to be the one for tracking the whole world. Okay, so phones have microchips. The other thing is that there is no microchip in the vaccine. There's no metal in the vaccine. Okay, and the contents of the vaccine are listed. You can check the contents yourself. There is nothing metallic in there. The ingredients have been published. So microchips, not true. Another myth, a third one, is that the vaccine contains luciferase enzyme, which makes firefly glow. And so those who believe that this is true believe that the injected arm begins to emit a glow, so that becomes easy for those who are vaccinated to be detected and monitored. Again, as I said earlier on, there are ways to monitor people. And you notice that people commit crimes sometimes will not use mobile phones. They trash their mobile phone. Okay. And if you turn on on internet and you turn it on, you can see your address and where you are exactly on your phone or any device that you are using. So this is not true. There are easier ways of monitoring people. Okay, fourth myth is that these vaccines can change DNA and genetic material. Again, this is not true. And because people hear of nucleic acid, and we know that DNA, as human beings, we have DNA. Okay, so people start to think when they hear RNA and DNA that, okay, this is going to change my DNA. Again, it's not true. Number one, the messenger RNA vaccines don't end, the messenger RNA vaccines, the RNA does not enter the nucleus where the DNA is. And the thing about messenger RNA is that it is easily trashed. Okay, after the response, after the immune need has been generated, the response has taken place, the immune response has taken place, the mRNA is trashed, it is shredded. It's not like it's going to stay in your body. Okay, so it does not enter the nucleus where the DNA is, and it does not, there is no evidence whatsoever that it affects the human DNA. Okay, and if we look at it also, if it is true that it affects the human DNA, I don't think you will find presidents of nations taking the vaccine, prime ministers taking the vaccine, doctors taking the vaccine. No doctor will want anything that will change his DNA. Nurses taking the vaccines, politicians, business people, they don't want to lose their money. They won't take anything that will change their DNA. So it's not true. DNA will not be changed. The fifth myth is that vaccines cannot be produced within a year. Okay, because the traditional way of producing vaccine takes much longer. And so there is suspicion that the current COVID-19 vaccines, something has been done, that people think that there must have been shortcuts which will make the vaccine not to be safe. This is not true. We should realize that in every area of technology, there has been advances, improvement. If you think of cars, computer, it's so funny. I just remember when I was doing my bachelor's degree and my final year, there was no computer. If you go to the library, you go through the old journals, you dust them, okay? But right now you can search for journals, you can use Google, you can go to any website. So there are advances, and so even in medical care, we can see the advances taking place. So we should not be surprised to have advances in the area of vaccine technology. And I want to say that the lady who was at the forefront of the development of mRNA vaccines is a Black lady. She's a Black lady. And if you take the Pfizer vaccine, there are Black people who were part of those who conducted the research. So it is not like there's a strategy and there are shortcuts. We have to understand that we're in a global pandemic and people are dying. Okay, and in producing this vaccine, the governments were concerned, people were concerned, a lot of funding went into it, which is not the typical way vaccines are funded. And then a lot of researchers got so interested in it. And because there was a pandemic, there were ready volunteers for this. Okay, so the development of this vaccine, the testing of it went through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. No shortcut at all. And these clinical trials involved over 70,000 people. Most drug trials don't have that kind of population. Even the landmark drug trials don't get that kind of patient or volunteer population that we've had with these vaccines. And again, the research has been ongoing in developing a vaccine against coronavirus, because this is not the first coronavirus that we've had, and this has been over 10 years. Failures every time. Okay, and like I said, a lady who was at the forefront, I think it was a PhD, okay, at the forefront of developing mRNA vaccine. It's a Black lady, and this is a breakthrough for medicine. And it is timely that the technology could be applied during this pandemic. And we can see from what happened in Israel, they're using one of the vaccines. There has been over 90% reduction in infection because of the way the Israeli community adopted vaccination. So we need to realize that. And then the sixth one is that it has long-term side effects, severe side effects. Okay, but if Dr. Amma said, if you look at the risk-benefit, the benefit-risk ratio, you can ask a question: what are the long-term side effects of COVID? Even in people who are asymptomatic, people who have not come down with the disease in such a way that they've been hospitalized. What are the long-term effects of those asymptomatic infections? We don't know yet. And we've had people talking about long COVID. Okay, and we've had reports of people having all kinds of symptoms 6 months after COVID-19 infection. So we cannot assume that the mere fact that you don't have symptoms also means that you are totally safe from this virus. Okay, so most vaccines, when we see side effects with vaccines, usually on all the side effects are usually under a period of a few months, weeks to months. I cannot recollect any vaccine that had long-term side effects, and I don't think this vaccine will be different. Okay, so there is no long-term side effects. Okay, and look at the number of people who have participated. We haven't heard of long-term side effects so far, and we can keep monitoring, and there is no doubt that those who are experts in this area of vaccine research know and have stated clearly that there are no long-term side effects. If we look at the United Kingdom, I think more than 60 million people have been vaccinated, and we haven't heard of any severe side effects amongst the 16 million people. In my household, my wife and I have been vaccinated, and I can say that we don't have any serious side effect. Okay, the seventh one is why. Okay, let me quickly say that the vaccines, I mean, the side effects are generally mild, usually fatigue, low-grade fever, chills, body aches, and so on. Some people say that this is another myth, that if the survival is 99%, why then bother to get the vaccine? Again, as I've said, do not minimize the risk of long COVID, okay? And we have to think of the vulnerable in society as well. An eighth myth is that it causes fertility problems. This is not true. There was a study that looked at COVID in terms of spermatogenesis in 19 male patients, and found that patients with COVID have impaired spermatogenesis. So COVID itself can reduce fertility, and there's no evidence that the vaccine reduces fertility in any way. So there's a greater risk with the infection. Okay. Another myth is that the antibodies that are produced will cross-react with placental proteins in women and make them infertile. This is not true. The British physician who stated this, who gave this idea, which has been debunked, has retired. Okay. And then other scientists have debunked this idea because the spike proteins are not similar at all to placenta proteins. Some people have said the vaccine is not safe. I've addressed that. Millions have taken the vaccine already. Some people say, okay, you don't need to wear a mask after the vaccine. That's not true. We should still wear a mask after the vaccine because the potential for infection is there and we can still spread to others. Okay, so the 11th myth, I will soon round up now. A person who has had COVID does not need a vaccine. That's not true. Because the natural immunity associated with COVID does not seem to last long. And there have been reinfection in patients who have had COVID. Again, finally, 12th myth, COVID vaccine is the mark of the beast, or 666. I mean, and this myth is generally amongst Christians. This is not true because number one, the vaccine, the 666 is supposed to be given at the right hand, okay, or the forehead. But you will find that the COVID vaccine is given to shoulders. So this cannot be 666. And there's evidence that genuine believers will not take the mark. And of course, the Antichrist system is already in operation. And the Antichrist must be in existence before 666 has occurred. There's no evidence that the Antichrist is in existence right now. So really, this is not 666. All right, so thank you very much for listening. I hope I was able to address some of these myths. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Great. Thanks so very much, Professor Balogun. That's another quite comprehensive one as well. I'm sure if any of our participants have questions they're going to ask, and you get an opportunity to address those questions directly as well as we continue. Just before we go to our final speaker, Dr. Balogun, we did not design, by the way, to have two Baloguns on our panel today, but we are grateful for it. So we're just going to go to our third poll. And if you could just again, just use your mobile devices or your screens and your mouses and just select what you think would be your response to it. All right, I'm launching the poll now, and it says, what is your most trusted source of information regarding vaccines? Now, some of the questions and the options here obviously are a bit, some people might consider it to be a bit silly or anything like that, but really what the position we're taking is that there is nothing that is silly. As the professor said earlier on, that a lot of the misinformation, a lot of people believe it is not for lack of intelligence. There are genuine reasons why people believe what they believe, why people have been led to the direction that they're in. And so we don't want anybody to feel like, any response at all that they choose will be dismissed offhand. So please, like I say, some people are responding already. We'll just give it a few seconds and then I'll display the result. All right, with 70% of participants voting, well, I'll end the poll now and display the result. And you can see, majority of participants here, 42% said healthcare professionals, which is, really good. It's followed by World Health Organization, WHO. That's pretty good as well. Mainstream media is huge, obviously, and it can be a reliable source of information sometimes, but it can also, as Dr. Arma has said, not be reliable sometimes as well. So thanks for that as well. It's good to know, how participants on this program are thinking and where they're getting the information from. Okay, so I will stop sharing this and we'll go straight away to our final speaker. We're already behind time. Dr. Hamed Balogun, please take it away, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you see?
Yep, we can see.
Thank you very much. So again, just a disclaimer, because I work in the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm not here to to promote any specific product. So therefore, it is just general information which is in the public domain. And of course, it is part of our responsibility to educate people about what's going on, and of course, assist individuals to make an informed choice. I will start with a very interesting picture here. Again, personally, I don't think anyone should feel ashamed, particularly if they don't have any information about about vaccines or what vaccines really represent. Again, it's an historical issue, something which we know has always existed. And I'm afraid this is something which may also still continue to exist in the future. So The challenges around vaccines or vaccination is not going to go away overnight. But of course, what's unique in our current situation now is that people who didn't really show interest in the past have now decided to, to take it upon themselves to basically ask that question, okay, do I really need to be taking this vaccine? And hopefully at the end of the whole process globally, I think everyone would have become more informed, not just about vaccines, but about medicinal products which they take on a regular basis. Very quickly, again, one of the advantages of being the last speaker is I know most people would have said something about this. And of course, this is just a quick diagram to show you what typically major vaccine platforms that have been used in designing the vaccine. Now, the reason I'm showing this is to lay the foundation for the aspect of my presentation, which is, of course, looking at this from the angle of how vaccines are actually manufactured. Because it is one thing for us to say, yes, I'm happy to take the vaccine, but at the same time, there's always that question, where did the vaccine come from? How was it made? And I think that's a very valid question. And I think it's a question every single one of us should ask every time we are taking not just a vaccine, but also other medicinal products as well. Very quickly, again, I did mention that my focus is going to be how the vaccines are actually made. And I'm glad that Professor Balogun already said something along this line with regards to the testing and the fact that rigorous processes have been put in place to ensure that the vaccines are of the best quality. And of course, we can imagine, in a situation like this where there's eyes on everyone, those working in the manufacturing and in the approval of the vaccines as well. So there is close scrutiny from the public, and I believe that because of that close scrutiny, the vast majority of everyone involved will make sure that they dot their I's and they cross the T's correctly to make sure that they don't make a decision that they would later on regret down the line. And again, very quickly, what happens with vaccine development? Oftentimes you start with exploratory development, and the good thing is that for a very long time we've been aware of the corona. We've been aware of coronaviruses in general. And the good thing on this occasion is that the moment, before the pandemic was even declared, scientists already had, the genetic sequence or genomic sequence of this virus. That was as far back as early in the year last year, around about 12 months ago. They had the sequencing available to them. So they had something to work with. And of course, based on that, they were able to move very quickly to preclinical development. And again, at this point in time, we just need to let you know that, the reason why everyone is talking about this particular virus in this occasion is because of the pandemic nature of it. Oftentimes, scientists are always working behind the scene. Even for conditions that we are not aware of, they are constantly doing something to see what is responsible for a particular condition and how they will be able to handle it in the future. And again, once you've done your preclinical science, you then move on to the clinical trials, which of course is divided into phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. I will talk a bit more about phase 1, 2, and 3 trials in my next slide. But once that is done, once that is completed, then of course you then apply for approval with the regulatory agencies. And I think this is where things become really, really critical, because all of the activities that the researchers or the companies have been involved in the last years, it becomes the moment of truth for them to actually say, look, all what we've done, is it worth it? Is it working? Because at the end of the day, the regulators might come back and say, look, we're not happy with what you're saying. And by the way, it has already happened already with some of the so-called vaccines that we have right now. So I think we're lucky in the sense that the vast majority of what we have currently produced have been seen in a positive perspective by the regulators or by the regulatory agencies around the world. And of course, once they've got the approval, then they go into manufacturing of the vaccines themselves. Now, I said something around phase 1, 2, and 3 trials. Again, this is where this is a stage where you initially test this the vaccine or any product at all in a very few people, very small population of people, to see, look, what's going to happen. You know, oftentimes you start with one person, you see how that one person behaves, you divide them into cohorts, you see how that one person behaves, you maybe treat maybe 5 more, and again you continue to do that until you reach that 100 that you're looking for. At times the number is less than that, but the information you get from that first one will now assist you in moving on to the next phase, which is phase 2 trial. Now, moving on to phase 2, because of what you are able to understand from your phase 1 trial, you are then able to move on to phase 2 trial and then use that information to redesign the trials. And then once you have additional data or information about the safety and the how the compound would work in the human body, then you now go into the phase 3 trials, which is always a large scale trial, oftentimes with thousands of people. Now, the advantage we have, unfortunately, in this current pandemic is that one of the best times to actually know if a vaccine would work or not is during a pandemic, unfortunately. And so it was an opportunity that we had an ongoing pandemic, and there were lots of people who were willing to volunteer for this trial to make sure that we were able to achieve sufficient data. In fact, I think there were more volunteers than the companies actually needed for many of these trials, because of the nature of the pandemic, and people were really, really ready to go along with volunteering for these trials. And again, the information has helped to move the trial very quickly. And again, very quick presentation here to show you what happens now. The question a lot of people are asking is, why is it so quick during this time, and why is this development very quick? We know in the past it takes an average of maybe 8, 9, or even 10 years to come up with a licensed medicinal product, not just the vaccine, a licensed medicinal product. It takes many years. And in fact, in some cases, it's taking up to 40 or 50 years to actually develop a vaccine. And ironically, for some conditions, viruses that we've had for a very long time, we've not even been able to develop a vaccine for it. But again, I think a combination of years of research and understanding of how some of these viruses behave has helped facilitate this current developmental process. Now, very interesting slide, which is shown here, which is developed by the WHO, showing us what actually happened this time around. Now, typically what tends to happen is that because of the amount of resources involved in developing a vaccine, oftentimes those involved tend to wait. They wait to finish preclinical. After finishing preclinical, they move to phase 1. They wait a few months. Now, preclinical at times take up to a year or 2 years. Then as you're doing that, you move on to phase 1, you move on to phase 2. Once you finish phase 1, you move on to phase 2. You finish phase 2, you move on to phase 3. Then you now start requesting for approval from the regulatory authorities like the FDA or the MHRA. Then after you receive the approval, then you now start manufacturing. Now, what's different this time around is that as scientists are coming up with data, as they're coming up with information, they are sharing that information in real time with the regulatory agencies. So they didn't have to wait till the end of a trial to go and start talking to the agencies to say, look, this is what we found. And you can understand the reason why the companies do it at times is obviously they want to protect the patent rights. But this time around, the companies didn't really care. They said, look, you know what, we need to get an answer. And therefore, they were sharing that information freely with the regulatory agencies to tell them that, look, this is what we found. This is what we are saying. So by the time they had finished their phase 3 trials, the regulatory authorities already have a ton of information at their disposal that would help them be able to move forward, to be able to make a decision whether they want to approve the vaccine or not. So, and I think that's one thing that's very unique this time around. And again, scientific advice is something which companies don't oftentimes use with the regulatory agencies, but this time around, they were able to have very close collaboration with the regulatory authorities, with scientists around the world to say, look, all hands on deck. What ideas do you have? This is what we are seeing. Can you advise us what to do? And because of that close collaboration around the world, they were able to reach a quicker, end of the trial with sufficient data to now move forward. Again, manufacturing as well, they have started, preparing. You can see the millions of doses that have been produced around the world, created factories in advance, created, facility, trained people in advance in anticipation that, they will get a positive approval for their vaccine. Ironically, there are other companies who have spent that money and their vaccine have actually failed. So they've wasted that money, and you can see the reason why most of the time companies don't go down that route. But again, we find ourselves in a unique situation around the world, and governments and philanthropists were willing to put down money and willing to even allow that money to go down the drain, even if that science fails. But luckily, we are glad that for quite a number of them, these things have worked out very well. Now, and I think one very common question people tend to, show a lot of interest in is what's actually in the vaccine itself. Now, again, I'm not going to go into too much details about this, but what I can tell you is that we have, of course, the antigen, which of course is the main active ingredient. But of course, you can't just put the antigen in a bottle and begin to give people. You need to put it in a way that allows you to be able to inject it or to be able to deliver it correctly. First and foremost, you need to put it in a preservative. Secondly, you need to put it in a stabilizer, something that actually helps the vaccine to prevent it from sticking, the vaccine component from sticking to the vaccine vial. Because if you're not careful, you put it in a bottle, the vaccine itself would stick into the container, and you find it difficult to deliver it to people. Then you have surfactants. Surfactants are basically ingredients that help you bind all of your components together. Then there's something we call residuals. Now, these residuals are things you can't completely get rid of because of the manufacturing process of the vaccine itself. So these are things which you may say they are not really doing anything, but they are just part of that manufacturing process for the vaccines. Then finally, we have two more components. We have the diluents. Oftentimes, this is usually water, just ordinary water, water for injection or sterile water, which you kind of mix together with the vaccine to give it volume. And finally, you have the adjuvant, which helps to improve the immune response to the vaccine. Oftentimes, these are aluminum salts. And again, aluminum salts are things we are already familiar with, which we often find in our regular diets. Very quickly, clinical trial effectiveness, what does it mean? Now, and I think this slide is, specifically targeted for those of us who are still, thinking, having second thoughts about, does it really work? And what I can show you here in a pictorial form is that, simply put, again, for the Pfizer vaccine, assuming you have 40,000 people who were involved in the trial. Now, those 40,000 people were divided into two. Hypothetically, you have 20,000 people receiving the actual vaccine and another 20,000 receiving the placebo, which essentially is nothing. It has no vaccine. At the end of the day, only 8 of those who received the vaccine out of the thousands of people who had received the vaccines, only 8 of them eventually came down with COVID. And even those that came down with it, at the end of the day, they didn't experience a serious medical condition. And compared to 162. Now, from the perspective of an epidemiologist, the difference between 8 and 162 is massive by the time you factor in the millions of population of people around the world. So it is a breakthrough, and I'm glad of that the results which have been shared recently by the hospitals in Israel, because they were quite ahead in terms of the vaccination. And they've shown very promising results that, look, this actually works. It makes a difference in our hospital admissions, and it does make a difference in the people who are actually falling sick as well. And again, I'm glad to see as well in the UK as well, we've seen significant improvement as well in the statistics. For those who are monitoring the daily results, you see that we've seen significant changes over time. Very quickly, I'm glad my colleague, Dr. Amma, already said something about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But again, in the past, we know experiments have been done wrong. And of course, the question we need to be asking ourselves is that should those historical challenges of experiments which have been done badly inform our decision about this vaccine today? The answer for me is no, because essentially I live here in the UK, and of course, when I'm standing on the queue to receive the vaccine, I'm receiving exactly the same vaccine that my other colleagues are receiving, whether white or brown or black, regardless of race. We're all receiving the same vaccines, and of course, we know that these historical challenges, were very well publicized, and it is a subject of training for every single healthcare professional to avoid these mistakes again. Again, very quickly, the summary of what happened with the Tuskegee syphilis study. I'm not going to go over this again, but this was something which was really, really bad, and it was really, really bad science. And hopefully, things like this will not repeat itself again. Again, the reason I'm showing this particular example is just to say that, look, this is not just for Blacks. Okay, it doesn't really. Historically, the issue has not been for Blacks. We know what happens in the Nazi medical experiments, which happened during World War II. Horrendous, terrible experiments that were conducted on people. There's so many of them, too many to even talk about. Even more severe than some of the things that we even talk about today now. So again, this is not just unique to Blacks. It is something which we know has happened to others as well. Again, finally, this is an example of one also that happened in New York. Again, this was Willowbrook School study. Very terrible experiment as well. This was done, to study the effect of hepatitis, and this was actually using mentally delayed, children who had mental challenges as well. And again, unfortunately, some of these disasters have been really bad. But of course, we know that this is not just unique to the Black population. This is science which have been done by, terrible people, and obviously, these are things that we now have, in this period, ethics committee, or who look out for some of these dangers in scientific research as well. So essentially, if you're going to conduct a research and the ethics committee doesn't approve of it, the ethics committee will be people locally in that area who understand the challenges being faced by the people. They would have to give approval for any scientific research to occur before anyone will be allowed to get involved in that scientific research moving forward in the future. Now, finally here, why did I take the vaccine? I'm saying this personally to myself because, quite frankly, I do share the concerns that many people have about these vaccines, in the sense that, we shouldn't. It's interesting, the survey that was conducted, that nobody trusted government. It's interesting that survey showed that no one actually trusted the government. And I'm not surprised because, because of, some of the things we see on a day-to-day basis, and, some of the people we call leaders, we will not be happy to even have them as neighbors, let alone, appoint them as our leaders. So essentially, but again, it's an informed personal decision in the sense that, look, what's actually going on here? What are the advantages? And for me, the first point here is, I need to protect myself and I protect my family as well from many of the serious and potentially deadly diseases as well, not just for COVID, but other medical conditions as well, which we know vaccines can actually protect against. Also, it's an opportunity to protect other people in my community as well. And I'm glad that Dr. Aisha mentioned that in the example as well, that not everyone will be able to receive this vaccine or vaccines in general. But of course, by people who can receive it getting vaccinated, potentially they're also improving the overall immunity within the community itself. Again, I know that these vaccines have undergone rigorous safety testing before being introduced. And also, they're also constantly being monitored as well. Again, I would say this, that some of these vaccines or some of these medicines are even safer than the food we buy in the supermarkets, where we don't even know where they're actually coming from. They've been manipulated many times, moved from place to place. So essentially, we know, generally speaking, from a scientific viewpoint, that testing has been done correctly. And again, we do recognize, I must say, that sometimes these vaccines do cause mild side effects, but of course, on balance, we know part of the reasons why it is causing it is because it is a sign that your immune system is actually responding to what has been injected. So that is a good thing in many instances. And of course, reduce or even get rid of some diseases as well if enough people are vaccinated. And finally, again, and I think Dr. Amma showed that example, that the relationship between vaccine availability and the eradication of certain medical conditions. Based on the estimates of the WHO, we know that roughly up to 3 million people, 3 million deaths worldwide is prevented every year as a result of vaccine programs. So this is all I have. In the interest of time, I hope with some of the things we've said here today, that we'll be able to have would have converted some people. But again, at the end of the day, it's an informed choice, and I think it is very important for us to make that decision at a personal level, and of course at a community level as well, to ensure that we are all protected against this deadly pandemic. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and I think and I look forward to to hearing people's feedback and also questions as well. So over to you, Mr. Michael.
Thank you very much. That's really comprehensive and really informative. I think it really helps to understand how these vaccines are made and what's in them, and I think you've made that very clear. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Balogun. All right, so we've got all our panels back. We are running, really running by time, but we'll find a way to just speed things up in this final phase. We've got questions that I would quickly put across to our panelists. We have someone who's asking, can you please, I'll put this to Dr. Aisha. Can you explain in detail why people who have recovered from COVID-19 need to be vaccinated again?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. So I guess that question can have two answers. So if you catch the virus itself, there's no guarantee that you're going to make antibodies. So I don't know if anybody heard about the covalence and plasma trial that went on, where we were giving antibodies, plasma from people who caught COVID, and they were using the antibodies in the plasma. So a plasma is when you run down blood and you take out the action of it, and they were giving it to sick patients in ITU to see if that helps them to recover from COVID. And during that study, so anybody who had COVID, they invited them to come and donate their plasma. And that study, they found that women didn't tend to mount a response compared to men. In fact, I actually caught COVID myself before I was fortunate to get my vaccine. I caught COVID over the Christmas. And for 3 weeks, I still hadn't made any antibodies. And me and my husband and I, we all caught COVID in my house. And my husband and I signed up for this. And they said, no, they only want men for this study. They don't want women because they've seen that women are not making antibodies. So that's one reason why, even though you've got COVID, you should go and get the vaccine, because there's no guarantee you make the antibodies. Some people might say, well, is there any guarantee you make antibodies with the vaccine? And I take that's a valid point. Again, that's not 100%. But there is currently a study where I work. They're looking at staff members. They're checking everybody who takes the vaccine. We're going every month to check our antibody levels to see what we have. So there's still, studies underway for that. But the answer would be, there's no guarantee you make antibodies and we've seen that from trials after the actual virus. And there's a more likelihood based on the trials that you make antibodies after you've had the vaccine. I hope that answers the question.
Well, I hope that answers the question. It definitely is comprehensive enough for me. There's another question that I'm not quite sure who to direct it to. If an individual is COVID positive when the virus is coughed out, how can one do so unhampered if wearing a mask? The virus will not have anywhere to go, so it's likely to be inhaled. No. Now, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question. Whoever sent this, if you could just resend it again in a way to make it clearer, that would be really helpful. In the meantime, I just want us to quickly do this poll on COVID passports. You would have heard about COVID passport. What is your view on venues? I'm launching it now. What is your view on venues, countries, etc., demanding to see proof of COVID vaccination before entry? So I returned from Southern Africa. I visited 4 Southern African countries in March last year. Literally came back, and the next day or so there was lockdown. And one of the countries I went to was Angola, and I needed to show proof of yellow fever, I think it was, vaccination before I could come in. I'm just thinking, what is the opinion, the thought of our speakers, so our panelists? Let's start with Dr. Awa on that, COVID. While the thing is going on, we'll see, I'll tell you what our attendees or participants say. Dr. Awa, please.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I wasn't sure whether that was my name. So my views on COVID passport. Right, let's use this analogy, and I think I've heard, it must have been you who used this analogy at the time, Michael. So we all need to be protected, and every organization and every setting will actually have a responsibility to protect the people who work in those various organizations. Now, people will put things in place for safety in their organizations. So, for example, if we are all let out now, the lockdown is over, and we are doing, you know, our normal stuff, and for example, we want to go to a place, let's say, for example, a restaurant. Now, that restaurant, or the authorities or the managers of that place, they have a duty to protect the people who come to the restaurant to eat. So they might have it in their policy that they are only allowing people who have got the COVID vaccination to come into their premises, just because they are responsible for the safety of the other people, of the people in their premises. So I think that is valid. That's because they actually care about the people who come into their businesses. So I think that's one way to look at it. And again, for example, if there are policies in place, there are things we have to abide by laws and rules of countries or places that we go. For example, like the airports, we know that it wasn't the same in the past. In the past, 10 years, 15 years ago, you go to the airport and you are fine to walk in with your shoes and your bottle of water or whatever. But we know these days is not the same. You go there now, you have to remove your shoes. And you know that you have to remove your shoes because you want to travel. You don't argue with that. So it's the same principle that is going to be applied. Because, for example, places like Australia, we know they have zero COVID. So it is very okay for them to say, you have to show us that you do not have COVID before you come into Australia. Otherwise, we don't know, because it takes only one person to actually spread the virus. It doesn't take a whole community. It takes one person who will pass it to another person and will know what the RO level is. You know, one person can infect 2 to 3 persons, you know, and those 2 to 3 persons will infect their own 2 to 3 persons, and on and on and on it goes. It multiplies. So I think my view is that to get a COVID passport is a fair thing, because people need to be protected, because we know this pandemic is very heavy. It's the impact is massive, and it's not just one place, one country that has it. It is a global. It cuts across the whole globe, and like we know, Professor Balogun has talked about long COVID is. So it's not like when you recover, that is the end of it. There's aftermath. So we need to be sure that people are protected. People are not having COVID, so that at the end of the day, people are not living their lives short because of the impact of COVID. That's my view.
All right, thanks so very much. Well, unfortunately, because of time, we won't be able to go into more questions. There are more questions, but we won't be able to. Okay, the person who asked the question that I wanted to read earlier, just in the interest of fairness, I would ask you to please bear with us for some 2 to 3 minutes to just tidy this up. So he said basically that the logic would dictate that wearing masks are harmful if it disables the expulsion of carbon dioxide. Who would like to respond to that from our panelists, please? Does logic dictate that masks are harmful if they, stop us from expelling carbon dioxide?
It might have to do with the length of time you wear the mask, because you shouldn't be wearing a mask for 24 hours. So you can take a breather. You can remove your mask when you're not in the crowd, in crowded places. You can, you shouldn't have your mask for 24 hours. You need to take in fresh air. So I'm not sure if that's what the question is talking about. And then
it might be, yeah. It might be, yeah. Yeah.
Can you see my hand? Okay.
Yeah, please go.
Yeah, there have been studies that have shown that it does not affect the carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's
and of course
right,
that you have surgeons operating for 8 hours. They have their mask on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, I wear my mask for 12.5 hours when I'm at work every day. So
yeah,
from morning, as soon as I get to work, I'm wearing a mask till I leave, 12.5 hours.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine
and I'm still
that.
standing.
All right. Well,
I think patients with asthma might find it more difficult, or patients with respiratory disease.
Yeah.
But it's not because of CO2.
Okay. No, thank you very, very much. We have to go because I'm trying to make sure that I keep to the time. We'll say we're finishing at 7:30. Want to finish at 7:30. I would have really, really liked to get the thoughts of Dr. Balogun on, the fetal tissue issue. A lot of people are concerned about, COVID vaccine containing fetal tissues. Aborted babies, to put it crudely, if you like. And I would have really, but Dr. Balogun, do you think you could say something in a minute, just so that at least I won't feel too bad that we've already got 5 minutes over?
Okay, that's fine. I think I'll try my best to answer it very quickly, because it's a question that requires careful explanation. And the reason why I say this is because it's been a lingering issue now for scientific development. When you're developing, when you want to grow a substance, for example, you have to grow it in a living tissue. Okay. Now, what tends to happen over a long period of time is that you could identify a living tissue, which you could take from someone. It could be from anyone. It could be somebody scraping of his skin cells from somebody. It could be blood. It could be plasma. So because you want to grow it in a medium, in a biological medium. Now, in the past, okay, there were times when, or there had been collection of, controversial, so to speak, collection of fetal tissue samples, because obviously that allows, because of the nature of the human fetal tissue cells, it allows scientists to be able to grow cells. Now, some of these cells would have come from maybe babies that have been aborted for maybe certain reasons, or for different sort of reasons. But again, that's why I said it is very difficult to be able to explain in detail how this. But I think what happens is that oftentimes you have a cell line. Now that cell line, I could have one cell line and make manipulation of that cell line to allow me grow what I want to grow in a particular medium. The same way we do culture medium for bacteria in the lab. So you look for culture medium from human plasma. You put it in a petri dish. Then you take your bacteria, you put it on it to see what would happen. Now it's something that is very similar that happens with the tissue samples. But now the question which people tend to ask is that, does it mean that those fetal tissue samples end up in vaccines? The answer is no. It doesn't happen, because you can imagine how that would feel like, because you're going to react to it. Anytime you have foreign tissue from anyone, if you take my blood sample, if you take a sample of me and put it in anyone on this panel, there'll be a reaction. So essentially the same thing would have happened if some of these historical cell lines had ended up in the vaccines, and it's been given to a large population of people. So I think it's a very long winding question, but the answer is that yes, for scientific development, you use both animal tissue and human tissue to develop viruses in the system, but of course that doesn't end up in the actual vaccine itself. I hope that answers the question.
I think that does so beautifully well, if I may say so. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really sorry that we've run over the time that we said. Thank you very much, everyone who has participated. I want to thank our speakers. I wish we had more time, because there are more questions that you could be answering for us. I want to thank you for sparing your time and joining us today. I want to encourage everyone that's participated, please share this video with as many people as possible. We're trying to, to get information out, positive information out, useful information out that can help people to make up their own minds, but from an informed position. So if you could also help as well, we'd really appreciate that. The videos will be available on our website, www.dean-global.org. Also, if you're living in diaspora, I really want to encourage you to check our website out and see if you can, join us. We are trying to build a movement to try and work for positive change in Nigeria from where we are. So I hope you will stay to complete a survey at the end of the event. Just a very short, I think it's just 3 questions, and that'll be it. Thank you again to everyone, our speakers, every participant, everyone who's dialed in. Thank you and good night. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.